So you want to create a portfolio website with Next.js 13 server components, Tailwind CSS and Sanity.io? Well, you have come to the right video because that's exactly what we'll build today, as you see in the background right here. In this video, we'll create in total 3 pages, one index page, a guestbook page, and a projects page. We'll use Prisma for our guestbook page. We'll learn how to revalidate data, how server components work, how client components work. You'll also learn how to set up Sanity and fetch from Sanity, and you'll learn how to set up dark mode and how to store the theme for the user preference. That's all what we'll build today in about 2 hours. So now let's check out the demo behind me and let's go. So right here on my screen you see what we'll build today. We have the index page with an image of myself, a few links right here and a little description. We also on top right here have a nav bar with a theme switcher. If I click on it we have dark mode, and if I reload the page you see the theme is still persistent. If I now click on the guestbook, the first thing you will see is that the underline has changed. It's now not more present under the home page, but now under the guestbook page. Right here we now have a guestbook where I can send a message. So let's say, hey, how are you? And I can click on send. This will now send that and revalidate it also. I can also click on projects right here. This data is fetched from Sanity, as you see. I can also click on a project and this will now open in a new tab, the YouTube video. Also, the cool thing with this project is that this project is completely mobile friendly. So if I make the screen smaller, as you see, everything still works. I can also click on the bars and we get the individual links. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and now let's go. So to get started, I will cd into my desktop directory, cd into my YouTube directory and run npx create -next-app at latest. With the latest command, I tell the CLI to install the latest Next.js package and no outdated package. Right now I will click yes to install the newest package and it will now ask me for a name. So let's name it portfolio Next.js and let me use a dash right here. And let's click enter. Let's right here use TypeScript. Let's use ESLint. Yet let's use Tailwind. We won't use the source directory, we will use the app router. I won't customize the default import alias and now I can click enter and this will now install. So Next.js has now finished installing and I can now go back to Visual Studio Code, and as you see I already opened the project, and if you want to do the same, go on top and click on file and click on open folder. But if I now open the Explorer right here, you see right now we have pretty much an empty directory. So right now we only have the default template that Next.js ships with. Now the first thing I want to do right now is actually configure our Tailwind.config, since I want to use external packages. Now let's first of all, let's delete this background image since I won't need that. And now let's open the terminal. And inside of the terminal, I will now paste the command, and for you, you should just go to my GitHub and copy it from my GitHub. And what we will do right here is install the Tailwind CSS typography plugin and the Tailwind CSS forms plugin. These two packages are just used as helper packages, so they pretty much extend Tailwind CSS. And we also install Prisma, and we'll use Prisma to query our database later. So now let's click enter and this will now take for a bit. Also you see I installed it right here as a development dependency, so this won't impact your bundle or anything since it's only used for the development. Also I want to install a few more packages, so again just go to my GitHub and copy the commands from there. And now that's no development dependency anymore, that's a normal packages that we'll need. The first one is Next Themes, and Next Themes will be used to make dark mode work, so the theme switcher and the storing of the user preference and everything like that. And we install Headless UI React, and Headless UI is pretty much a headless component library, so the components aren't styled and we'll have to style them ourselves. So it's also pretty much similar to Radix if you're familiar with that. And now I can click enter. So now where everything is installed, we actually also have to tell Tailwind CSS that we want to use 2 plugins. And to do that, that's actually pretty easy. All you have to do is pretty much inside of the plugins array, tell Tailwind that you want to use the Tailwind CSS typography plugin and the Tailwind CSS forms plugin. That's all it is actually. We are now done with Tailwind and I won't have to do anything else. If I now open my Explorer again, I can open the global CSS file, and as you see we again have some default styles. Let me delete them since I won't use them. And now where that's done, I think we can actually start with coding our application. And the first thing I think I will do is actually open the layout, and let's style the layout for a bit. Let's go right here inside of the body tag, and the first thing I want to do is actually style the body tag. So you see right here we have a class name with the inter.className. So right here we pretty much tell Next.js that we want to use the inter font, but let me add a few more class names. To do that, what you have to do is use upticks right here, not question marks but upticks, and then you have to pretty much pass the inter.className inside of the dynamic value. Now we can add a few more class names, so let's do an BG of white, let's do an text which will be black. Let's right here also do in dark, which will be BG. And for the BG, I will now use a custom value. That's why I use this arrays right here. So these pretty much square brackets. And the custom value will be hashtag 090908. This is the custom value. Let me change the plus to an hashtag. And now this looks good. Now let's add a few more class names actually. Let's do in dark, which will be of text white. Let's do an age of full. Let's do a selection, and the selection will be BG gray of 50. And let's do in dark, which will be selection of BG gray 800. So now let's actually start our dev server so we can see something. So open your terminal and run npm run dev. This will now start your dev server on localhost 3000. So let me go back to localhost 3000 and open our application. So I'm now on localhost 3000, and as you see pretty much the default template that Next.js ships with. So let's actually change that. To do that, go inside of your page.tsx, which is your index page. Let's delete everything which is inside of this return statement. So let me do that. That's a lot, as you see. And let's just say an h1 with hello from the index page. If I now save that and go back, you just see this hello from the index page. But this is a good example to see right now what background color we have. Now one thing you probably don't know is right here we use the selection, pretty much a class name. And if you didn't know what selection means right here, if I select this text, that's pretty much what the selection class name does. So if I change this dark selection BG gray 800 to BG blue 800, save that and go back, you will now see that this has changed to a blue selection background. So that's all it is. And if I change it back to an BG gray 800 and go back and select it, this looks good. Let's also check out if white mode works. So if I change my preferences right now to white mode, you will see right here that the preference has changed. We have a white background and our text color has changed to black. And if I select it, you see it's pretty much a bit of grayish. So now that works, and I think we can actually continue. So let me again change it to dark mode. So now where you see that both work, so the BG in the dark state and in the light mode state, I think we can actually start off with a nav bar. So let's do that. To do that, you will go inside of your Explorer, inside of your app folder, and let's create a new folder called components. Inside of the components folder, I will create a new file called navbar.tsx. And what I will have to do inside of here is do an export default function. Let's give it a name of navbar and let me open that function. Now inside of this navbar, I will use headless UI. And if you didn't know, headless UI pretty much uses state. So if you're new to Next.js, if you use state, you always have to mark your components as use client, since the component will run on the server, but it will have to hydrate on the pretty much browser on the client side. So on top right here, just use client, and that looks good. Now inside of our export default function, let's do a return, and let's return a disclosure. And the disclosure is imported from headless UI React, and let's close that. So now I also have to configure disclosure, so I have to tell it how it should show in the VDOM, so at what HTML element it should be. And I want to show the disclosure right here as a nav element, so let's do an as, and let's say as a nav, just like that. And now inside of the disclosure, I can get in state actually, which is the open state. And with the open state, I can then later on style pretty much our state of if the navbar on mobile is open or if it's closed. So now that looks good. Now inside of this open, let me use empty tags right here. And inside of the empty tags, let's use a div. Let me style that div. So let's give it a class name of max width, which will be 6XL, MX, which will be auto, PX, which will be 4, SM, which will be PX of 6, and LG, which will be PX of 8. And then inside of this div, let's create another div. Let's give it a class name of flex and justify, which will be between, just like that. And let's do an age of 16, so a height of 64 pixels. Then inside of this div, let's create another div. Let's give it a class name, which will be flex, justify will be between, and width will be full. Inside of this div, I will create another div, and let me give it a class name of flex and items of center. Now that's the last div for now. So now inside of this div, I can create a link, and the link is imported from Next link, and that's the link component provided by Next.js. You can think of it pretty much as an A tag with superpowers, so client-side routing, prefetching, etc. So now I import that from next/link, and let me open that. Right now you see TypeScript complains a bit, and it tells me that the property href is missing. So let me give it an href, and the href will just be the slash. And slash pretty much tells the link that it should link to the home page. And now inside of this link, let me add an h1 tag. Let me style that, so let's give it a class name of text of 2XL and font, which will be medium. And then for the h1, let's just say Jan. Let's add a span. Let's give it a class name of text, which will be teal 500. And let's say Marshall. Now, if I go back to localhost 3000 and reload the page, you won't see that navbar. So let's change that since I want to see it on the screen. To do that, go back to your layout right now, and now inside of the layout, I want to show the navbar above our children. So go above your children and let's just import navbar from our components. If I now save that with a self-closing tag and go back and reload it, you right here on the top see our navbar. We have the logo right here, and if I hover over it, you see on the bottom left corner that it links to localhost 3000, which is our home page. So now we are done with that, and I think we can actually continue with the navbars since we are still not finished and there's still a lot more that we have to do. So now let's go under the h1 tag, under the link tag, and under the div tag right here, and let's create another div. Let's give it a class name, and the class name will be hidden. SM will be margin left of 6, SM will be flex, SM will be space of x8, and let's do an SM, which will be items center. Inside of this div, I want to again use the link component from Next.js. I've already imported that, so that looks good. But I will again have to give it an href, so let's give it an href of the index page, so just an empty slash. I will also want to give the link to more properties, so the class name and the prefetch. Now, if I write prefetch, so let me spell that correctly. So all this prefetch property does is tell Vercel or Next.js in that sense, it should fetch the data in the background, so if I click on the link, it will almost be instant. And then now, where we understand that, let me also add a class name. And for the class name, I will want to use a dynamic value. So I want to style the class name based on our path name. So let's use upticks for that, and let's use the dollar sign with the brackets right here. Inside of here, I will want to use a ternary and check what path name we are on, or on what path we are. So what you'll have to do is go on top right here, and so right here on top, I want to get the path name. To do that, I will do an let path name, and this will be equal to use path name. Sadly, this hook does not import for me, so let's do that manually. So let's do an import. Let's destructure use path name, and it still does not import for me, which will be from next/navigation. So now I think that looks good. Do I get any errors? No, I don't think so. So now that looks good. Let's right here use an or. So if we don't get anything, this will just be an empty slash. So that looks good. And now right here for our styling, what I want to do is pretty much check if we are on the index page. So let's do a path name. And if this is equal to our index page, so just an empty slash. So now inside of here, let's use a ternary. So let's do a question mark. And if this is false, let's use a colon. Let's first of all style the state where that's true. So let's do a border, which will be teal of 500. Let's use a dark, which will be text of white. Let's use an h of full. Inline, which will be flex. Let's do an items, which will be center. px, which will be 1, pt, which will be 1, border, which will be 2, or not border, but border bottom, which will be 2, text, which will be small. Let's also do a font of medium. Now right here we have styled our class name for if our path name is true to the index page. So now let's actually test it out and see if it works. So if I go back, right here you see a border which is teal. If I go back right here, you see I haven't gave it a name. So let's do a name of home. And if I now save that and go back, you see right here our link, which is home. You see that the border is right here within teal. And that's because the path name is true since we are on the index page. Let me also give it a styling of if this is not true. So let's do a border, which will be just transparent. Let's do an text, which will be gray 500. Let's do a dark, which will be text of gray 300. And let's do a dark, which will be hover of text white. Let's do an inline of, let's say, flex. Items, which will be center. Let's do a px of 1, pt of 1. Border will again be bottom of 2. Text, which will be small. And font, which will be medium. And if I now save that, you still won't see anything since we're still on the home page. But if I now copy this link right here, so let me do that. Let's just duplicate it right here. And let's change the href right now right here to, let's say, hello. Let's change the path name right here to hello. And let's say the name also hello. And if I now save that and go back, here you see that how the styling looks if it's not an active page. So you don't have any border anymore. And right here, the text color is a bit darker. But now let's actually change it to actual name. So this right here will be the /guestbook. This path name will also be guestbook. And the name will just be capitalized guestbook. If I now save that, that looks way better in my opinion. Also, let me again copy that and duplicate it since I want a third link. And the third link will just be the projects link. So let's give it an href of projects. Let's give it a path name of projects, and the name will just be projects, just like that. If I now save that, you see that looks great. We have now 3 links, which are all styled. So now I think we are done with that, and we can continue. Now one thing you will see right now, if I make my screen smaller, so mobile device, you see that we don't have any links anymore, so that's good. But you see we don't have a button right here to click to show the mobile view of the links. So let's change that right now. Let me again make a desktop view right now. And let's go back to Visual Studio Code. What you'll have to do now is go under the link component, under the div, and under the following div. And let's create another div. So let's give it a class name. So the class name will be -margin right of 2, flex, items, which will be center, and I think an SM of hidden, so we don't show it on larger devices. Inside of this div element, what I will want to do now is use a disclosure.button. So let's use a disclosure right here, .button, and let's open that. Inside of the disclosure.button, I want to give it a class name. So for the class name, let's give it an inline of flex. Let's give it an items of center. Let's do a justify of center, padding of 2, rounded of medium, text of gray 400. Let's say hover of text gray 500, hover of BG gray 100. Let's also do a focus, which will be just outline of none. Let's do a focus of ring 2. Let's also do a focus of inset of ring inset, and let's also do a focus of ring teal 500. And I think the last style we will need is in dark, which will be hover of BG gray 800. If I now save that and go back, you will still not see nothing. So if I open the mobile device right here, you don't see anything, and that's because we will have to add an SVG right here. But before I do that, let's actually use the open state right here. So if you can remember, right here on top, we got the open state, which tells us when the disclosure, so when the button is clicked and when the disclosure is open, or in that sense, when it's closed. And right here, let's again use in ternary, so question mark, this will return something, and let's use a colon, which will also return something. Now right here, I want to show SVG icons, and the SVG icons, I will get them right here from heroicons.com. And heroicons.com is a project by the Tailwind.css team, which provides free icons to use. So right here, let's search for X, and let's use this X mark right here, and let's copy the JSX, and let me paste it inside of here. And if it open is false, so if it's closed right now, let's search for bars. Let's use right here this bars -3, and let's copy JSX, and let's paste it inside of here. If I now save that, in theory, everything should work. So let me make it again small. So now that looks great. As you see, we have a button right here with the bars, and if I hover over it, we have a background color. So now that looks great. But if I click on the button, you see, even though we have this X mark, we don't have this overlay that I wanted with the links. And to do that, we'll have to do a bit more configuration. So we'll have to use a disclosure panel. And thankfully, it's not that hard. So go under your disclosure button, or actually right here above this empty tags. And above them, we'll create a new disclosure.panel. And this is right here just used as a pretty much overlay, which will house all of our links on mobile devices. So let's first of all start with styling it. So let me give it a class name. And the class name will just be a simple SM of hidden, since I don't want to show it on bigger devices and I only want to show the disclosure.panel on mobile devices. Inside of this disclosure.panel, let's use a div, and let me style that. So let's give it a class name of padding top of 2. Let's also do a padding bottom of 3, space, which will be y of 1. That's all we need for this div. Now inside of this div, let's use a link element. And let's again give it an href property, since TypeScript complains a bit. Let's give it an href of just an empty slash, since it will be the index page. And let's give it a prefetch property. Also, I will want to use a class name, and the class name will again be based on the state of our path name. So inside of here, let's use upticks, not question marks, upticks. Let's use the dynamic value right here, and let's ask us if path name is equal to the index page, so just to the slash. Let's again use ternary with a question mark where we return something, and a colon if this is false. Now if this is true, I will want to give it a few class names. So bg will be teal of 50, we'll have a border which will be teal of 500, a text which will be teal of 500. Let's also do a block. Let's do a padding left of 3 right here, not 2 but 3. Let's do a padding right of 4. Let's also give it a padding y, let's say 2. You could of course change that if you want. Let's do a border of, let's say, left 4. Let's do a text of base, font which will be medium, and dark of text gray, let's say 800. Let's test it out. So let me save that, and let's open the button right here. And as you see, we have this overlay. Let me actually add a name right here, since we don't see anything. So let's do a home. And if I now go back, you see right here home. Now this is white. This shouldn't be correct. It should have a background color for the dark. So BG teal 50, that looks all good. And I see the error right here. I said dark text gray, but this should actually be BG of gray 800. If I now save that and go back, you see this looks way better. And if I again change it to white mode right here, so let me go on display, and let's do a dark mode of off, you see this looks great. So we see everything works. And now let's add the class name of if it's false. So right here for the ternary, let's do a border, which will be just transparent. Let's also use a text, which will be gray 500, hover of BG gray 50. Let's also do a hover of border gray 300. Let's use a hover of text gray 700. Let's also do a block element padding left of 3, padding right of 4, padding Y of 2, and in dark of hover, let's say BG gray of 700. Now, right now we wouldn't see anything, so let me again copy the link element right here, and let me duplicate it and paste it inside of here. Now let's change the naming of that. This will be the guestbook, so let's change the name to guestbook. The href will be /guestbook, and the path name right here will also be guestbook. If I now save that and go back, you see right here the styling for the guestbook, and this also looks kind of trash. So I think I have again misspelled something, so let's go back and see where the error is. So the error is that we need a few more class names. So let's do in border of left 4, let's do in text which will be base, let's do in font which will be medium, and let's add an important class name of dark which will be text white. If I now save that, you see if this reloads right now, and let's open that again, this still looks not great, and this should actually be in dark of text white. So let's go back and let's again check out where the error is. And the error is that I haven't changed the class name for the second link. So let me just copy the class names and let's paste them inside of here again. If I now save that and go back, you still see that this overlay right here does not look good. So let's change that. And I think I have found now the second error. And the error is actually right here we have in hover of text gray 700. But this should not be gray 700, but text of white. So let me change it for both links. If I now save that and go back, this now looks way better and this now works perfectly. Now the last link we have to add is our projects. So let me again copy the link and duplicate it right here. Let's change the href to, what was it, projects. Let's add and /projects, and for the name, projects. If I now save that and go back, we have all three links, projects, guestbook, and home. This all looks great. We have this hover effect. Everything works. So now I think we are done with that. Let's again open the desktop screen. And yes, this looks also great. So now I think we can start off with the index page. And if I again look at this page, I already see one thing I don't like. And that's that this h1 with hello from the index page goes right to the screen, but our navbar has some padding right here on the top. To change that, we'll again have to go to our layout right here, and we'll have to implement a few things. So I think we should wrap our children inside of a main element, and let's style that main element. So let's give it a class name of max width 6xl, mx will be auto, and let's do an px of 4, and sm which will be px of 6, and lg px of 8. If I now save that, in theory everything should look better, and as you see now the margins are the same on both sides, and if I make it smaller you still see everything looks perfect. So now we are done with that, and I think the next thing we will do is add a dark mode switcher right here. So let's do that right now. Well, to do that, that's actually not hard. So let's go right here inside of our app folder, inside of the components, and let's create a new file called provider.tsx. And this provider right here will be used to store the user preference. And to make it work, it's not that hard. So let me close the Explorer right here, and let's add a use client, since right here we'll use state again. And now let's create an export function. Let's name it provider. Inside of here we'll get the children, and as you see right here TypeScript complains and it tells us that it does not know what type children are. So let's give it a type which will be children of type React Node. React Node is imported from React, and as you see we don't have any errors anymore. Now let me open that function, and inside of here I want to return our theme provider. Theme provider is imported by Next.js, and let's pass our children inside of here. Or let's wrap our children actually inside of the theme provider. That's correct. Now this provider, or this theme provider in that sense, should be accessible from every route. And so to make that work, we'll again have to use the layout, and we'll have to wrap our children inside of this provider. So to do that, copy your main and your navbar elements right here, and let's wrap them inside of our provider. So let me import my provider from components provider, and let's pass my navbar and my children inside of here. Now this will work. Another thing I will have to do is inside of the HTML tag, let me add and suppress hydration warning property. And this is just there to pretty much, as it already states, to suppress hydration warnings. And now we are done with that. And what we'll have to do now is create a button. And with this button then, we will switch the theme. So let's again go to the components inside of our app folder. And inside of here, let's create a file called theme button.tsx. This will again be a use client component. And again, if you didn't know what use client means, it still runs on the server. So this component is not client rendered, CSR rendered, but it's still SSR rendered, so server side rendered. The only difference to a server component is that it will hydrate on the client. So it runs on the server, but it hydrates on the client. And now where that's out of the way, we can create now a new export default function. So let's do an export default function. Let's name it theme button. And right here, let's just open the function and let's return a button for now. Now inside of this button, let's give it a class name. And the class name will be bg of teal 500. Let's give it an opacity of 30. So if I use the slash and give it in value, you pretty much give it the opacity of a percentage. So right here I used 30% opacity of bg teal 500. Now let's add a few more class names. So right here, let's do a padding of 2 and let's do a rounded of LG and text of teal 500. That looks good. And now we'll have to use a hook provided by Next Themes to set our theme if the user clicks on the button. And to do that, go right here on top and let's do a const and let's destructure with an empty object. And this will be equal to use theme. And use theme will be imported by next-theme. Themes. And then inside of our const where we destructured, let's use the set theme and let's use resolved theme. And now what I want to do with the button is if the user clicks on the button, I want to set the theme. So to do that, go right here, let's add an onClick handler and let's set our theme. So let's do a set theme. And right here, let's check if the resolved theme is equal to dark. I want to show the light mode. And if it's false, I want to show dark mode. Now you see I made an error right here. This should not be in colon, but this should be in question mark. And now this is all we have to do. So again, what do we do right here? We checked if the resolved theme is dark, and if it's dark mode, I want the theme to change to light mode since the user clicked on the button. And if the resolved theme is equal to light mode, I want to show the dark mode. I think that's understandable. And now we're done with that. And now inside of the button, I want to show an SVG icon based on the user preference. So if it's, for example, dark mode, I want to show in sun. And if it's white mode, I want to show a moon icon, for example. So right here, we'll again have to use ternary. So if resolved theme is equal to dark, let's use ternary. So let's return something empty. And if this is false, let's also return something empty. And again, to use SVGs, we'll go to heroicons.com and let's first of all search for a sun icon. And let's use the first one. So let me copy JSX and let's paste it inside of here. And for if it's false, so if we have white mode, let's search for moon icon. So let's do moon and let me copy the first one and let's paste it inside of here. So now that looks great and I won't have to change any class names since that all looks great. But now we're still not finished. I could of course leave it like that, but we would get errors. So what we'll have to do is actually add a use effect. And with the use effect, we would only mount the theme button once our page has been loaded. And why do we do that? That's because we don't know the theme on the server side. And with that, we are safe that we always show the right preference. So if the user is in dark mode, we are sure that we can show the sun icon. And if it's the opposite way, we can show the moon icon. If I would not do that, we would get the error that even if we have in dark mode, I would still show the moon icon, which would of course not be correct. And to do that, we will have to use state from React. So let's do const, let's do mounted, set mounted. and this will be equal to useState, and useState is imported from React, and the default state will be false. Now we'll have to use an useEffect, and the useEffect is imported from React, and inside of here, let me open that. Let's use an empty dependency, so just an empty array. And now inside of here, what I will do is in set mounted, and let's set it to true. And all this useEffect does is right now, if useState, so in the initial state is false, and once our site has loaded and useEffect has been run, we will set mounted to true. And right here, what I will do is then if mounted is not true, I will just return nothing. So I will return null. So again, to paraphrase what we have done right here, we check if the site has loaded, and if the site has not been loaded, we show nothing. But once the site has loaded and we have gotten the correct theme, we show a theme button switcher. So now let's actually also show it inside of our navbar. And to do that, let's go back to our navbar right here, and inside of our component, let's scroll up a bit, so where we have these links. And now under this link right here of projects, let me use our component of theme button. That's imported from theme button. This is a self-closing tag. And if I now save that and go back to localhost 3000, you right here see our theme button. But if I now make it a mobile device right here, so let's do that, you see we don't get this icon anymore. So to do that, that's again not hard. What you will have to do is go above this disclosure.button and let's just add it. So right here, let's use a theme button. Let me spell that correctly. This will be in self-closing tag, and you see right here we have this button. Now this looks great, but if I make a desktop again and click on the button, even though the icon changes, our theme does not change. And to make it work, it's again not hard. It's again a bit of configuration. So what you'll have to do is go inside of your Tailwind.config.js, and then inside of here, we'll have to add the dark mode property, and this will be equal to class. So what I do right here is tell Tailwind that I want to show the dark mode based on a class that we have inside of our attributes. So now what you'll have to do is restart your dev server, so stop it and run npm run dev. And if I now go back and reload the page, you will see that we have a button right here, but if I click it, again nothing changes. Well, that's weird. And why is that? Well, that's because we have to tell the providers right here what attribute we want to give it. So what I have to do right here is add the attribute property and set it to class. If I now save that, what you will see is that it will work. So if I now click it and reload the page right now, and let's do that, you see it works perfectly. So if I now open the DevTools, I will show it actually to you. And let's open the elements. Let me zoom in a bit. So right here. So you see right here inside of the HTML tag, we have this class which is set to dark. If I now click on the button right here, you see it has changed to light. And with this, I pretty much can store my theme and everything inside of this class attribute. So now that looks great. And if I make it mobile and test it, this also works. So now we are done with the theme button. And that looks great in my opinion. And now I think the first thing we will do is style the index page. So let me again make it to dark mode. And also let me show to you what I meant with the useEffect. So if I reload the page, what you see, we don't have nothing for a bit, and then our style loads, so our button, that's the useEffect as I already said. But now let's style our index page. So let me go to the page.tsx, and page.tsx is, as I said, already our index page. And now inside of here, let me delete this return statement, and let's create a new return statement. Let's do a div element, let me style that. So let's give it a class name of divide, which will be y. Then we'll have a divide, which will be, let's say, gray of 100. Let's do a dark of divide gray 700. And then inside of this div, let's create another div. Let me style that. So let's give it a class name of space, which will be y2. Padding top, which will be, let's say, 6. Padding bottom, which will be 8. Medium, which will be space of x, let's say 5. And then inside of this div, let's create an h1 tag. Let me give it a class name of text, which will be 3XL, font, which will be extra bold. Let's also do a leading of 9, not 8, but 9, tracking, which will be tight, And let's do in text, which will be gray 900. Let's do in dark, which will be text, let's say gray 100. Small, which will be text 4XL, and small leading of 10. Medium text, which will be 6XL. And let's do in medium of leading 14. Now for the H1, let's just say home. And if I now save that and go back, you see right here home. If I change it to light mode, everything still works. Now our home is pretty much in darker color, so that looks great. So now we can continue. So under the H1 tag and under the div, let's create another div and let me style that. So let's give it a class name of items, which will be center, space, which will be y of 2, XL, which will be, let's say, grid. Let's do an XL of grid calls of, let's say, 3. And let's also do an XL of gap x8. And let's do an XL of space y of 0. That looks great. And now inside of this div, let's create another div. And let's give it a class name. So let's do a class name of flex. Flex, which will be call. Items, which will be center. And let's do a padding top of 8. Now inside of this div, I will now want to show an image. So right here on the left, I want to show an image about myself, then a little bit of text, and on the right we'll have a big text block. So right here you will have to use an image tag, which is provided by Next.image. And as you see, it's already imported right here on the top, import image from next/image. Now you see that the image component complains a bit to me. It tells me right here that I don't have an alt prop and I also don't have a source. So let's first of all give it an alt and let's say picture of Jan Marshall. And now we'll also have to add a source. And the source is interesting since, as you see in the public folder right here, I already added an image. So just do the same, get any image you want and add it inside of your public folder. And I will want to use that. And to use that, I will have to go right here on top and import that. So let's do an import of me from, let's say, @/public and right here my image.jpg. And now for the source, I can just use it, so me. If I now save that and go back, I see we get an error. I think that error was nothing important. And if I save that, I still see nothing. Well, I see my image right here, but that's way too big, way too big. So to change that, I will have to give it a few class names. So let's do a class name of height of 48, width of, let's say, again 48. Then I want to do a rounded of full, an object of cover, and let's do also an object of top. If I now save that and go back, you see the image is way smaller and now that looks way better. But I already see one thing I don't like. The image is centered, but this should not be. It should be right here on the left. So let me go back. Let's check how the class names look. So we have an item center, space y of 2, XL grid. XL grid calls 3, but right here grid is misspelled. So let's spell that correctly. And if I go back and save that, you see now the images on the left side. So now that looks great. This looks how it should look. So let's continue. So now under the image tag, I want to add a bit more info. So let's create an H3 tag. Let's just say Jan Marshall. And if I save that and go back, right here you see my name. So that looks great. Let's continue. So let me give it a style. So let's give it a class name of pt4, padding bottom 2. Let's say text of 2XL, font which will be bold. And let's also add a leading of 8, tracking of tight. So that's all I think. If I now save that and go back, yeah, that looks great. So under this H3 tag, I want to create a P tag now with a little bit info about myself. So let's again add a class name of text, which will be gray 500. Let's do in dark, which will be text gray of 300. And let's do in text, which will be center. Inside of this P tag, let me just write, hey, my name is Jan. And I am a full stack developer. If I now save that and go back, you see right here we have now this info, my name and the info right here. So that looks again very good. And I think we're now done with that actually. So let me spell this I correctly before I continue. Yeah, I think that's done. What I want to do now is show icons on the bottom. So an icon for my email, icon for LinkedIn, for GitHub, I don't know, Twitter, whatever it is, or x.com. So let me do that right now. To do that, go under the p tag and let's create another div tag. Let's style that. So let's give it a class name of lex and space x of 5 and padding top of 6. Inside of this div, I want to create an a tag. And right here you will have an href, which I leave empty, and I will have to give it a target. And for the target, I will use an underscore blank. And this underscore blank pretty much tells the application that if I open the a tag or click on it, it should open this site on a new tab and not on the same. And now for the a tag inside of here, we'll have to use an SVG icon again. So to do that, I am right now on React SVG icons right here. And now let's search for, what do I want to use? Let's search for GitHub. This will now take for a second. And let's use the first one right here. Let me copy right here TypeScript, yeah. And let's just copy this SVG. If I now go back, let me paste that inside of here. Let's save that. Let's delete the props right here, the width and the height. And let's create a custom class name. And let's say width of 8, height of 8. What else? Text of teal, let's say 500, and hover of text, let's say teal 600. If I now save that and go back, you will see right here we have now this GitHub icon, and that looks great in my opinion. Now the next icon I will want to use is the LinkedIn icon. So let me again copy the first one right here. Let's copy the SVG. Let's go back. Let me duplicate this a tag right here. Let's delete the SVG inside of here. Let's paste the new one I've created. Let me delete the props, width and height. Let me copy the class name from the old SVG and let's paste it inside of here. If I now again save that and go back, you will see right here we have now the GitHub icon and the LinkedIn icon. Now what do I want to use as the next icon? Let's use a mail icon. So let me search for mail. And now let's use the first one right here. So let me copy SVG. Let's go back. Let me again duplicate the a tag right now. And let me change the SVG to the one that I've just copied. Let's paste that. Let's delete the props, width and height. Let me copy the class name from the old SVG and paste it inside of here. And if I go back, again you see our GitHub, LinkedIn and email. Now let's again use one more icon, and I think the last one will just be a Twitter icon. So let's just search for Twitter. And let's use Twitter circle, yeah, why not? Let's copy the SVG. Let me again duplicate the a tag right here. Let's delete the old SVG. Let's paste the new one. Let's delete the props, width and height. Let's copy the old class name and let's paste it inside of here. So now if I save that and go back, you see now that is fully functional. We have now 4 icons with GitHub, LinkedIn, email and Twitter. Now for yourself, you of course should also add an href right here, so where you want to link to. I won't do that, but you can do that in your own spare time. But now, as I already said, on the left I want this image with the small info about myself, but on the right here I want a little description, or not a little, but a bit bigger description about myself. And to do that, that's again not very hard. You'll go under the SVG icon, under the a tag, under the div and under the following div, and let's create another div tag. Now let me style that, so let's give it a class name of, let's say, pros, and this pros class name comes now from the typography plugin that we have installed, and this just makes it easier to style text. Let's give it also a max width of none. Let's do a pros of LG. Let's do a padding top of 8, padding bottom of 8. Let's do a dark of pros invert, and let's do an XL of call of span 2. Now inside of this div, I want to create 3 p tags. And inside of the p tags, I want to paste my content. Now I will just paste it for myself. You can either go to my GitHub and copy it and paste it also for yourself, or you can write your own copy. So let me just now copy that, and once I'm finished, I will come back. So as you see right here, I've now copied everything and pasted it. So we have 3 p tags with a little bit of text. And if I now go back, I think that looks great. Let me see if on mobile everything works. And on write mode, as you see, this also looks great. Now let me check it on mobile devices right here. And as you see, that also looks great in my opinion. So now I think we can continue with the next page. And I think the next page that we will style is the guestbook. So to start with that, what you'll have to do is again open your terminal. Let me stop the dev server. Let's clear everything. And now what I'll have to do inside of here is run npx prisma init. With that, I initialize Prisma as you see right here. And if I now open my Explorer, you see right here, it has created one folder called Prisma with our schema, which right now is empty. And we have an .env file right here with an empty database URL. Before I continue, let's go to git ignore and let's add an .env right here, since I don't want to add any secrets to my GitHub later on when we deploy our application. And now since Prisma is initialized, I think we can create a database, so let's do that. So I'm now on planetscale.com, and if you didn't know, PlanetScale is an MySQL provider and they also use Vitess under the hood. So scaling is not a problem since also YouTube, for example, also uses Vitess. But I will use PlanetScale because it's easy to use and it's free for one database. So right here, click on sign in and this will redirect you to the dashboard right here. Let's click on create since I want to create a new instance. Let's give it a name. For the name, I will just choose portfolio Next.js. For the region, I will choose for myself Frankfurt since it's the nearest to myself, and I will use hobby since that's free. Now I will click on create database. This will now take for a bit, and once that's done, I will come back. So as you see, PlanetScale has done initializing. So let me click on get connection strings and let's click on create password right here. Right here, it has now created an .env for us, or a database URL, I'm sorry. So let me copy that right now. Let's go back. Let's open the .env and let's paste it inside of here. If I now go back right here, I can click on schema.prisma and let me also copy that. And let's go to our schema.prisma right here. Let me paste that inside of here. And now the first thing I want to do is create a new schema or a new model in that sense. So let's create a model called Guestbook. Let me open that. And the first thing I will have to give it is an ID. And the ID will be of type string. And we will have an @ID, @default. And I want to use an UUID, so it will automatically generate a new ID every time for us. Also, I want to store a message, which will be of type string. And I want to store a username, which will also be of type string. The last thing I will want to do is add an created _@. This will be of type datetime with an @default of now. And what I will have to do now is push my code, or not my code, but my schema or my model in that sense to PlanetScale because right now it's empty. So to do that, go to your terminal, let's clear everything and let's do an npx prisma db push. This will now push my schema to Prisma, to PlanetScale, and right here you see your database is now in sync with your Prisma schema. So that's great. Now, one thing we'll have to do is actually initialize our Prisma client. And if you Google right now for Next.js Prisma best practices, the first link you will see right here is best practices for initializing Prisma client with Next.js. Now, if you didn't know, Next.js uses HMR, so hot reloading in that sense, or hot module reloading. And if we reload a page, it will create a new connection to Prisma client. And if we do that too many times and reload the page too many times, we'll get an error, as you see right here. Prisma, there are already 10 instances of Prisma client already running. And to pretty much prevent this issue, what you'll have to do is create a global Prisma when we are in the development environment, and if we are in production, we will just create every time a new Prisma client. So right here, you see the solution, and all you have to do is copy that file, go back, and now inside of our app folder, I will create a new file called db.ts. Inside of here, I will just paste that, and now that's all it is. So now we can continue with our guestbook, and to do that, go inside of your app folder and create a new folder called guestbook. And inside of the guestbook folder, we'll have to create a file called page.tsx. Now inside of here, as always, we have to do an export default function. I will have to give it a name of guestbook, and let me just open that function right now. Inside of here, let me do a return, and let's start off with a div. Let me style that div, so let's give it a class name of divide of y. divide of, let's say, gray of 200. Let's also use a dark of divide gray 700. And I think that's all. Now inside of this div, let's use another div and let's style that. So the class name will be space of y2, padding top which will be 6, padding bottom which will be 8, and md of space y5. Inside of this div, I want to create an h1 tag now, and let me style that. So let's give it a class name of text 3xl, font which will be extra bold, and let's do a leading of 9, and I think a tracking of tight. Let's also do a text of gray 900. Then let's also do a dark of text gray 100, sm of text 4xl, and I think an sm of leading of 10, md of text 6xl, and the last class name will just be an md of leading 14. Now for the h1, let's just say Guestbook, and if I now save that and go back to localhost 3000 and click on Guestbook, right here we get an error. So let me open my terminal. That's because of our dev server not running. So let's do an npm run dev. This will now again start our dev server. This will take a bit, so let me wait for it to start. So the dev server has restarted again, and now you see two things. First of all, our Guestbook site is working with our h1 tag, but also our navbar has changed. So right now our Guestbook has this border, but our home does not have this border anymore. And if I now click back on home, you will see that the border is again on the home page and not on the Guestbook. And if I now again click on the Guestbook, you will see it has the border again. So that works great. So the active state in that sense works. Also, if I open my mobile screen, so my panel right here, this also works great. Now, one thing I see right now is if I'm on write mode and hover over it, you see it does not look great. So let's change that. So I think what we'll have to do right now is go back, and then inside of here, border transparent, text gray 50, that looks good. But we don't have an hover of text. Ah yeah, we have an hover of text white. Let me change it to an hover of text teal 500. And if I go back and hover over it, that looks better. So let me copy this class name for the rest. So hover text white, let's change it to teal 500. And also let's do it for the other link right here. So let's do that. And if I now save that and go back, this all looks great. I think that is good. So we are done with our navbar now totally on dark mode and white mode, and we can now finish with our Guestbook. So let's do that. So to do that, go under your h1 tag and under the div under that and create a new div element. And let's give it just one class name of wfull. Then inside of here, I want to create another div element, and let's give it a class name of max width with a dynamic value or a custom value, of 500 px. And as you see, I again use this brackets or this array brackets, and that's because I can use custom values with that. Also, let's use an mx of auto and mt, so margin top of 8. Now inside of here, I want to have a form element or a form component. And since my form will be using state, I will have to use a new component and mark it as use client. To do that, again, let's go into side of the app folder, inside of the components folder, and let's create a new file called form.tsx. Now, as I already said, I will have to mark it as use client, since this component will use a state. So for example, the pending state. So if the user has submitted the form, or an use ref. And this only works if I mark it as use client. And again, for everyone to remember, use client does not mean that this component is rendered on the client or client side. All it does, it still renders on the server, but it hydrates on the client. Don't mix that up. It's still in pretty much, you could say it's pretty much in server component, since it still runs on the server, but it hydrates on the client. So keep that in mind. It's not a client-side component, it still runs on the server, but it hydrates on the client. So now where that's out of the way, I think we can continue. So let's start off with an export default, let's say function. Let's give it a name of form right here, and let me just open that function. Inside of here, I want to return now something. So let's return a form element right now, just the default form from HTML. And now inside of this form, what I want to do is actually style that. So let's give it a class name, and the class name will be just a relative. Also, let's do in flex items, which will be center, and let's do in text of small and margin bottom of 5. And now I think that's all for now. I will of course create a few more styles later, but let's just leave it for now like that. Inside of this form element, I want to use an input tag. The type will be text, so that's okay, but I will have to do a few more things. So let's do a placeholder, and the placeholder will just be your message, ... Let's also do a required, and I think let's do a class name right here. For the class name, let's do a padding left of 4, padding right of, let's say, 32, py of 2, so padding y, mt of 1. Let's do a focus of ring teal 500. Let me spell that correctly. Let's also do a focus of border teal 500. Let's give it a block element. Let's do a W of full border, which will be just neutral, let's say 300. I think that's good. Let's do a rounded of medium. Let's also do a BG gray of 100. Dark, which will be BG of gray, neutral, not gray. Let's say 800. And let's also do a text of neutral, so let's spell that correctly, of 900, and a dark of text neutral of 100. If I now save that and go back, you will still see nothing, and that's because I have to import that inside of our Guestbook page. So inside of this div, let's just import our form right here, so our form component, and if I now go back and reload the page, you see our form right here. So that looks great in my opinion, and if I click on white mode, it also looks great. Now I think I also have to add a button, so let's go back to the form right here, and now under this input element, I want to create a button, and I think let's start with a type, and the type will be in submit, since if I click on the button, I want to submit the form. Also, let's add a class name, so let's do in flex, items will be center, justify will be center. Let's also add an absolute, since the button will be absolute inside of this input element. Let's also do in white of 2. Let's do in margin on top of 1. Let's do in font of medium, an H of 7, so in height. Let's do in BG of teal, let me think, let's say 500 with an opacity of 30. So it will have the same background color as our button right here. And then let's also add a text which will be neutral, let's say 900. And what else? Let's do in dark of text neutral 100. Let's do in rounded, and let's do in W of 16, so in width. And I think that's all. Now inside of this button, I want to just say sign. And if I now save that and go back, you will right here see the button. And also let's change it from sign to, let's say, send. I think that's better. If I now go back, you see our input is done. That looks great. And if I make it to dark mode, it also looks great. And if I make it smaller, you also see everything still works. So what do we do now? We have now a form, but it does not have any utilities, since right now it's just HTML with no actual utility, so no without any actions. So what I will do actually is go inside of my app folder and create a new file called action.ts. And then inside of this action, what I want to do is post the data to the server. And that's again very easy. All you have to do is an export async function. You'll have to give it a name. So let's do a post entry. Inside of here, I want to get the form data. And the type of form data is just form data. And now let me open that function. Now this right here will be a Next.js server action. And if you're new to Next.js server actions, you can just type into Google Next.js server actions and click on it. It will tell you a bit more about Next.js server actions. And the most important thing right now for us is that it's an alpha feature. That means it isn't stable and there will be problems and maybe also API changes, who knows. So definitely use them with a grain of salt. I wouldn't really recommend them to use them inside of production environments. But since that's only in portfolio what we create right now, I don't think it's that important. But all they do is pretty much enable you to make server-side mutations work, reduce client-side JavaScript, and also progressively enhance forms. And you see what you'll have to do inside of here is add a use server directive. And with that, we tell Next.js that the server action should only run on the server and never on the client. And to do that, right here, just run use server. Also, for this file on top, I will also have to name it use server, since right here we have an async function and I don't want to run it on the client. So right here, just add an use server directive on top. And now inside of this async function, let's use Prisma. So let's do a const data. This will be equal to await Prisma, and Prisma is imported from our DB file .guestbook.create. Since I want to create a new entry. Inside of here, I want to pass my data, and I want to get a message, and I want to get a username. Now for the username, I won't make it dynamic. I will just right now say hello. You could, of course, create an authentication provider. So you could, of course, use GitHub OAuth and make everything work. I won't do that. I will just leave it static with a username of hello. But you could, of course, use GitHub and then get the name from the OAuth provider and paste it inside of here. And now for the message, what I want to do is form data.get, and I want to get the entry. Since if you can remember, if I go back to form, I gave the input a name of entry. And that's what I do right here. I get the form data of entry, and right here it complains to me because it does not know what type it is. So this will be of type string. And now all we do right here is, again, we create a new entry inside of our guestbook with a message that we get from our form data and with a username, which is just a static hello. But again, you can change that if you want to. So now where that has been done, so we have created the action, we now have to somehow glue our form with our action together and make them work pretty much. And that's, again, not very hard. What you'll have to do is, inside of our form, we'll have to use an action. So let's use right here an action, and the action will be async. And then inside of here, I want to get my form data, and let's just open that function. Inside of here, I want to now create my post. And as you know, I already created a server action, which I named post entry. So what I will have to do is an await post entry, which I again import from our action file. And let me pass the form data. That looks great, but one thing you will see is if I open my terminal is to use server actions, please enable the feature flag. So what you'll have to do is open your next.config.js, and then inside of this next config, you'll have to do an experimental, and you will have to enable server actions. So let's set it to true. Now we'll have to restart our dev server. So let me run npm run dev. And if I now go back and if I reload the page, this should now take a bit. So right now we get an error right here, and that's because right now our form should be an use client component. So let's do an use client. And if I now go back and reload the page, you see we don't get any errors anymore. And now I think we can actually test out if everything works. So let me go back. Let's create a message. Let's just say hello and let's click send. And what do you see? You see absolutely nothing. I see three things I don't like. First of all, I clicked on send and the text right here is still present. Secondly, I can click the button every time and it isn't disabled. And the third thing is, I don't see any text right here. And now if I reload the page, you see even though our input is now empty and everything looks good, we don't have our text. So why is that? That's because if I go back to my guestbook page, we don't get the data anywhere. We need to fetch it first of all. And to do that, what you will have to do is, again, not very hard. You will have to create a new async function. So let's do an async function. Let's give it a name of get entries. And then this is just a normal function. So let me open that. Also, let's do an get entries with a lowercase g. Inside of here, let's do a const data, which will be equal to await Prisma. Prisma is imported from our DB file, .guestbook.findMany. And now inside of here, I only want to get the recent 50 messages. I don't want to render all messages. I only want to get the most recent ones. So let's do a take of 50. So I only take the first 50 messages, and let's do an order by, since I only want the recent messages. So let's do a created at, and this should be descending. Now the last thing you'll have to do is return that data. So let's just do a return data. Now this is safe to do because right now our page.tsx is in server component, so it only runs on the server and it does not have to hydrate anywhere on the client. Now right here I also have to get that data inside of my front end, so let's do a const data, which will be equal to await get entries. Now you see we get an error and it tells me right here, await expressions are only allowed within async functions on top levels of modules. Did you mean to mark this function as async? And yes, you see TypeScript already gave me the answer. All I have to do right here is mark my export default function as async. So let's do an export default async function guestbook. That's all, we don't get any errors anymore. If I hover over data, you see we have the types for it, so that looks great. What I want to do now is map over the data. So under the form element right here, let's do a data.map, let's get an entry and let's return that. Now inside of here, I want to create a div element and I will have to give it a key, and I will have to give it a key to prevent any React errors. And right here, let's give it a key of entry.id. Let's also add a class name of wfull, text which will be small, and break words. And now inside of this div, I want to show the message. So let's just say entry.message. Now, if I save that and go back, you see my message of hello right here. So that looks great. Now you see we get the message. So let's again test out the form. Let's again say, hey, how are you again? If I now click on send, again, you see nothing. But now if I reload the page, you will see the message is shown right here. But I don't want to do it like that. I want the message to automatically revalidate. And again, for that, Next.js has a cool function you can use. Let's again go to our action.ts, and inside of here, we'll have to use a cool function, which is called revalidate path. This is imported by next/cache, and inside of here, we want to pass the route, which we want to revalidate. And the route is called Guestbook, so /Guestbook. And now again, if we've tested out, so if I create a message of, hey, how is it going? This should now revalidate on itself. So let's do that. And you see, I haven't reloaded anything. Everything has been done by itself. Now you see also the spacing does not look good in my opinion. So let's change that. To do that, open your guestbook right here. And inside of this data.map, let me wrap that inside of a div element. Let's paste that back. And let's give it a class name of flex call, and let's do a space y of 2. If I now save that and go back, you see it looks way better, the spacing in my opinion. So now we are done with that. But again, if I create another message of yo, what's up, you will see again two things I don't like. The message is not cleared and we don't have any disabled state or loading state. To change that, we'll again have to go inside of our form component right here. And then inside of here, we'll have to create a new ref. Now, I know most people don't use any refs or don't even know what refs are, but to clear inputs, you'll have to use a ref. So let's do a const form ref. This will be equal to use ref, which is imported by React, and it will have a default state of null. Also, let's add a generic, since I later will get an error if I don't add it. And the generic will just be HTML form element. And that looks good. And now what I want to do is right here inside of our form, let's add a ref, and the ref will be equal to our form ref. Also inside of my action after our await post entry, I want to set the form ref dot current to .reset. So what that means is if I pretty much click on submit, it runs my action, it creates a new post entry, and once the post entry is created, it resets my input. You can test it out again. So let's create a message of does this reset ? And if I now click on send, you see it has resetted everything and we see the message right here. Now the last thing I want to do is add a loading state, and to do that you will see that if I go to Next.js, the docs website, and zoom in a bit, it's a bit, I know, too small for you probably. Right here you will have a tab for experimental use form status. So right now use form status is also experimental, but with that you can get the state of our form. So let me copy that right now, so the import statement right here. Let's go back and import that. So right here I just import the experimental use form status from React DOM. Now I have to initialize this hook, so let's do a const pending, since I want to destructure that, and this will be equal to use form status. So let me initialize that. I think I've misspelled pending, so let's write that correctly, and now that looks good. So what I want to do now is actually change the opacity of the form. So if the form is currently pending, I want to show an opacity which is a bit lighter, and if it's not pending, it will be 100% of the color. So let me show it to you. Let's just add a style right here, and the style will just be opacity, and let's say if pending is true, I want to add an opacity, so we'll use internally of 0, let's say 0.7, and if this is false, so if the form is not pending, let's just use 1, so the opacity is at 100%. So again, to rephrase, what have we done right here? We just check if pending is true, and if it's true, we set the opacity of the form to 70%, and if the form is not pending, we just leave it at 100%. Also, let me change the input. So right here, if the input right now is pending, let's add in disabled. So let's do in disabled with in pending right here. And let's also do the same for the button, since I don't want the user be able to click on the button when it's pending. So let's just add the disabled of pending. So now everything should work. So let's just say, hey, how are you, my friend? And let me spell friend correctly. And let's click on send, or let me try enter. And you see, because we use the submit, we have this native HTML linking in that sense. So if I click on my enter on my keyboard, it just pretty much submits the input. So now we are done with the guestbook. Let me check out if it looks good on mobile. And yes, I think that looks great. Let's use white mode right here. And yes, on white mode, it also looks great. Now, while thinking about this application a bit, I remember that I have forgot to add one thing. So if you didn't know, Next.js server actions are a bit special in that sense that the first request that I make on my deployed version later on will be fresh data, but each subsequent request is being cached. So let me dumb it down a bit. If I deploy my application to Vercel right now, and open my page and just go to the page. So I create a new fetch request. The application will get all of the fresh data, and that's great. But every time when I reload the page later on, I will get cached data. So if I create new messages and reload the page, I won't see them. But you of course don't want to do that. You want the user to see fresh data. So new messages, new guestbook entries, whatever. And to make it work, what you'll have to do is go right here above your export default function and add an export const revalidate and set it to a number. So right now I will set it to 60. And all it does right here is tell Vercel in that sense how many times or in how many seconds it should reload or revalidate our fetch request. So again, what does it mean? The first request I will make will be fresh data, which is great. Each subsequent request for 60 seconds will get cached data, so stale data. But the next request, which will come after the 60 seconds, will get again fresh data. And then again for 60 seconds you would get cached data, which is really fast. And then again after 60 seconds you would again fetch fresh data. So with that you get the power of being dynamic while being at the speed of static. So now I hope you understand that, and I also see I've misspelled revalidate, so let me spell that correctly. So now where we know what that is and our server components are not cached forever, we can now create our projects page. And to do that, go inside of your app folder and create a new folder called projects, and inside of here we'll have to create a page.tsx. And inside of here, we have to do what we have to do every time, and that's do an export default function. And let's give it a name of, let's say, projects. Now let me open this function, and let's start off with a return statement. Inside of this return, let's start off with a div element, and let's give it a class name of divide, which will be y, divide, which will be gray of, let's say, 200. Let's give it a dark of divide gray 700, And I think that's all. Inside of this div, I want to create another div, and let's give it a class name of space, which will be y2. Let's give it a padding top of 6 and padding bottom of 8 and a medium of, let's say, space y5. That looks good. And now inside of this div, let's create an h1 tag and let's say all projects. And I could save that, for example, and open the projects right here. So let me click on that. And right here you see all projects, but this is not styled. So let me style that correctly. So let's give it a class name. The class name will be text of 3XL, font which will be extra bold. We will have a leading, which will be 9. We will have a tracking, which will be tight. And let's say in text gray of 900. Also, let's do a dark of text, let's say gray 100. And then let's do an SM of text 4XL, SM of leading, which will be text 10, not 100 but 10, and MD of text 6XL, and let's do an MD of leading 14. Now that looks great, and if I now save that and go back, you see that now looks great and it's also consistent with every other page. So what I want to do now is map over our projects and show them. But to do that, I will have to set sanity up, since I want to fetch my projects from sanity and then show them on my page. And I will use sanity for that. And if you don't know, again, sanity is in headless CMS, and we will use it to store our content, so our projects inside of there. And what you will have to do for that is click on developers, let's click on documentation right here, let's click on getting started and on create project. Right here you will see a command to get started, and let me just copy that. Let me go back, let me open my terminal, let me stop my dev server, let's clear everything and let's paste that. And all it does right here is create a new sanity project at latest. We use a clean template, we create a project, we give it a name of sanity project, and we give it a data set of production. Now let me first of all change the name of sanity project to, let me think, let's say portfolio of Next.js. So portfolio-Next.js. And now let me click enter. This will now initialize or create a new sanity project. And as you see right here, I am already logged in, so I already have an account. If you get an error, that's probably because you either don't have an account or your account is not linked to Visual Studio Code. So do that, and then once that's done, come back. Now right here it asks me if I want to add configuration files to my sanity project, and no, I don't want to do that, so let's click on no, and let's click enter. For the project output path, let's do insanity. Then do I want to use TypeScript? Yes, I want to use TypeScript, and now this will bootstrap everything. And then as a package manager, I will want to use npm, so let me click enter, and this will now install everything for me, and once that's done, I will come back. So great, sanity has now installed everything, and you can check it out. If you open the Explorer right here, you see we have now a folder called sanity. And now that looks great, that's just the default template of sanity. And if I go back to the website of sanity, I can click on create a schema, and this will tell you how to create a schema and the file layout, and that's also the same that we have right here. And if you scroll down a bit further, you see right here, that's how you create a new schema. And that's exactly what we'll do. You will have to export default it, give it a name, type, title, and the fields. So let's do that right now. Let me go to schemas. Let's create a new schema of project. Let's .ts, and let's do an export default, and let me open that. Now we'll have to give it a name. The name will just be project. I will have to give it a title. So let's give it a title of project. And I will have to give it a type, and the type will be just document, since I want to create a new schema document. And now I also have to give it a few fields. So let's use an array with objects. And now the first object, or the first field in that sense, will just be the title. So let's do a name of title. Let's use a type of string. And let's use a title, let me spell that correctly, of uppercase title. Then the next field I want is a small overview. So let's give it a name of overview. Then let's give it a type, and the type will be string. And let's give it a title, and the title just will be small overview. And then what else do I want? Let me think of it. We will have a title, we will have an overview. Let's also use an image right now where I think about it. So the name will just be image. Let's give it a type, and the type will be image. And let's give it a title, which will be uppercase image. So we have a title, an overview, and an image. And the last field I want to have is a link. So let's do name, which will be link. Let's have a type, and the type will be string. And let's have a title, and the title will be uppercase link. So now I think that works. So what I'll have to do now is open my terminal. Let me clear everything. Let me cd into my sanity folder, and let me run npm run dev. This will now start my sanity dev server, so my sanity studio on localhost 3333. So let me copy that and open that right now. Now right here, you will have to choose your login provider with which you have created your sanity account. For me, that's GitHub, so let me click that. And now this will redirect me to Sanity Studio. Right here you see we get an error, no document types, and that's because if I go back, so let me open my Explorer, and if I open the schema right here, the index schema, you see we export an empty array. Inside of the array, I should paste my project, and that's imported from /project. And if I now save that and go back, you see right now, we have now a project field. So that looks great. I can right here create content as you see, and we get the title field and small overview field, an image and a link. So that looks great in my opinion. So I think we can create a bit of content right now. Let's create a title of portfolio, website, Next.js, something like that. An overview, let me just write something real quick. So I have just wrote, I have created a cool portfolio with Next.js and Sanity.io. It's very fast and cool. So you should also create one. Something like that. Now let me upload an image real quick. For the image, I just uploaded a random image right now. And now let me also add a link. And now for the link, I will just paste a YouTube link for my video about Next.js. But you can, of course, use any other link. And now let me click on publish right here. It tells me the document was published. And I think that's all actually. Now let me create 2 more projects. So if I go back to my page, that it looks better. So now you see I've created 3 projects and I've published all of them as you see right here. Published and published and published. So now that looks great and I think we can continue. So what I want to do now is actually fetch that content. And right here Sanity Studio has a cool feature with the vision tab. So let me click on that and right here I can test out our query. Now if you're not new to Sanity, you probably didn't know that Sanity uses its own query language called Grok. And at the first sight it may be a bit complicated, and if you're new to it you probably don't really understand it, but trust me, it's really not hard and you will get used to it very quick. And to make it work, it always starts the same. You use the asterisk symbol with an array. And right here you pretty much tell Sanity that you want to fetch everything inside of your schema. So I can click on fetch and as you see I get everything back. But that's not what I want. I want to get everything back from my schema called project. So to only fetch that, what you will have to do is inside of the array, do an underscore type, which should be equal to project. If I now click on fetch, you'll see I only get 3 items back, which is correct since I only have created 3 project entries in that sense. And what I get right here back is a title, a link, a overview, and type, ref, created at, everything like that. But I don't need most of these things. I don't need an updated ad. I don't need an underscore type. I don't need an underscore ref. I don't need that. So I can filter that down. So inside of here, I can use these brackets, like if you use an object. And let's filter it down. I want to have the title. I want to get the overview. What else do I want to get? I want to get the link. Also, I want to get an underscore ID. And now for the image, it's interesting. Since right here you see an asset, but the asset only has an underscore ref and an underscore type. I don't get any URL. But as you know, I want to get the URL. And to make it work, you'll have to create a new field right here. So I will just name it image URL. and this will be equal to the image.asset, and through the asset I want to get the URL. And if I now click on fetch, you will see I get 3 items with 5 properties each. I get a title, I get the overview, I get a link, an ID, and an image URL with the correct image URL path. So all I do right here is actually create a new field called image URL, and I get the URL through the asset. Now that's all it is. You can read through more about it inside of the docs, Sanity.io, presenting images if you want to know more. But since we now know how to make that work, let's just leave it like that right now. But before we do anything with our query, we first of all have to create a new client for Sanity. So let me go back to Visual Studio Code. And what you'll have to do right here, create a new terminal tab. And then you see it has been created, a new terminal tab. And what I will have to do is install our Next Sanity package. So let's do an npm I next-sanity. And with that, I install the Sanity client for Next.js. So while that installs, I can actually continue. So what I will do is go inside of my app folder and let's create a new folder called lib. And inside of this lib folder, let's create a new file called sanity.ts. And now inside of this file, I will have to import my client. So let's do an import create client, and create client is imported from next-sanity. And now I will have to create a few constants. So let's do a const project ID, which will be just equal to an empty string right now. Also, I want to have a const dataset, and dataset will just be equal to an string. And then the last constant I want is the const API version, and the API version will be 2023-101-01. And now let's create our client. So let's do an export const client, which will be equal to create client. So let me spell that correctly. And then let's pass the project ID, let's pass the dataset, and let's pass the API version. Also, let's use the Sanity CDN. So let's do a use CDN and let's set it to true, just like that. So now we have to give it the project ID and the dataset. And for that, let's go to the sanity.io homepage. So I'm now at sanity.io and I clicked on manage projects and on our project right here, portfolio Next.js. And now the first thing you see right here is our project ID, and that's what I need. So let me copy that and let's paste it inside of the project ID string right here. And the last thing I need is the data set, and for that you can click on datasets and you see the name is production. So right here all you have to do is just write production. So now we have created our Sanity client, and now we can actually continue with our projects page. And now what I will have to do is go under my h1 tag and under the div tag and create a new div element. Let me style that. So let's give it a class name and let's say grid, gap, which will be 4, sm, which will be grid of, let's say, calls 2. Let's add an md, which will be gap of 6. Let's add an lg, which will be grid of calls 3. LG, which will be gap of 10, and let's give it a padding top of 8. And what I want to do now is inside of this div, I want to map over my projects. And to do that, we again have to use our async function. So on top, let's create a new async function. Let's say async function get projects, and let me open that function. And inside of here, I can now do a const query, which will be equal to upticks. And inside of the upticks, I will now paste my query. So let's go back to our vision tab right here. And let me copy this query. Let's go back and let's paste it inside of here. And now, right now, our query is only static. So we also have to fetch it. And to do that, you will do a const data. This will be equal to await client. And client is imported from our Sanity file. And then you will have to do a dot fetch and pass your query inside of here. Now the last thing we'll have to do is return our data, and now that's all. Now inside of our front end, I want to get the data, so let's do a const data, which will be equal to await get projects. And it tells me await expressions are only allowed within async functions at the top level of modules. We already have had that error, so all we have to do is add an async right here keyword, and now everything will work and we don't get any errors. But I see one thing I don't like, and that's if I hover over data, it tells me data is of type any. And you saw if I hovered over data on the Guestbook page, we did not get this error, so we got types for our data. But right here, since we fetched it from Prisma, it sadly does not give me automatic types. But before I fix that, let me actually check out if everything works. So let's do in console.log where I log the data right here. And now let's open the terminal and let's run npm run dev. This will now restart my dev server. So let's again open localhost 3000 and let's wait till it's done restarting. And if I now open my DevTools right now and open the console, you don't see the console log. Wait, that's weird. Why don't we see it? Well, it's an easy answer. Server components only run on the server, and that means that console logs also only run on the server. So to see our console log, we'll have to open our terminal. And if I open my terminal, you see the console log right here with the data. So isn't that great? That's how easy it is. And as you see, all the data works, so that's great. What I want to do now is give it an interface, so if I hover over data, I get the types. So let's create a new interface, let's name it data, and let's open that. Inside of here, I will now get a title, which will be of type string. I will get an overview, which will be of type string. Then I will get a link, which will be also of type string. Then we will also get an underscore ID, which will be of type string. And then the last value that we'll have is the image URL. And the image URL will also be of type string, just like that. And what I will have to do now is right here for the data, just give it a type of data. But if I now hover over data, it thinks that data is just an object. That's not correct. Data is an array. So let's add the array right here. And now everything should work in theory. So now let's map over our projects and see if everything works. So now inside of this div, let me just map over our projects. So let's do in data.map. We inside of here get a project. And let's return that. Now inside of this data.map, the first HTML element I want to use is the article tag. So let's use that. And as you see, React or TypeScript complains, and it tells me that I have to use the key prop. So let's add a key, which will just be of type project._id. And then let me also style that article. So let's give it a class name of overflow, which will just be hidden. We also have a dark, which will be of border sync of, let's say, 600. I think that looks good. Let's do a rounded of LG. And let's do a border. Let's do a border, which will be gray of 100. Let's also do a BG of white. Shadow, which will be LG. Dark, which will be of BG black. And a dark, which will be shadow of gray 700. And let's also do a shadow on light mode of teal 100. Now inside of this article, I will want to use the image tag. So let's use the image component from next image. I have now imported that from next/image, as you see right here. And it again complains to me because I have to add a source. And the source will just be the project.image URL. And I will have to add an alt tag. So let's just say image of the project. If I now save that and go back, you will see we get an error. And it tells me image with source, with the source right here, is missing required width property. So let me change that. Let me wrap my image inside of a div element. So let me paste that back. And let's add a styling for my div element. Let's give it a class name of age of 56 and width will be full. Now if I go back, I will also have to give my image now also in style, which will just be full. And now if I save that and go back, you will see we don't get the error anymore with width, but we get a new error. And it tells me invalid source prop on next image hostname cdnsanity.io is not configured under images. So all it tells me right now is actually that I have to add the cdn.sanity.io to my hostname in next.config. So let's open the next.config.js and then under this experimental, let's do images, and images will have in domains, and domains will be an array with the cdn.sanity.io URL. Now I have to restart my dev server, so let's run npm run dev. This will now restart everything, and if I now go back and reload it, everything in theory should now work. And now as you see, everything works, but the image is way too big. It shouldn't be that big. And that's because I forgot to add a relative tag right here. So let's write relative. And if I now save that and go back, you see now it works. But the images are stretched the way that I don't like. So inside of the image component, let's give it a class name. And let's do a width of full, age of full, and let's do an object of cover. If I now go back, you see that the images now look good. We don't have any ugly stretching, so that's great in my opinion. But one thing I see right now is that I only have 2 calls, but it should be actually 3. So let's go back, and as you see, LG grid call 3 is misspelled. It shouldn't be call, it should be calls. If I now go back, you'll see we have now 3 columns, and that looks great in my opinion. Let's see if it works on dark mode, and yes, it works. We have this nice shadow right here, and on light mode we have this nice teal shadow on the bottom. So now I think we are done with that, with the images. We are still not completely done. So what I think I want to do now is add an h1 tag with our project title. So under the image tag and under the div tag, let's create a new div tag. Let's give it a class name. So let's give it a padding of 4. And let's say as a small of padding of 6. And now inside of this div element, let's use an a tag. Let me give it an href of project.link. Let's also give it a target of _blank, since I want to open this link on a new tab. And then inside of this a tag, let me create right here an h3 tag. And let's give it some styling of text, which will be large, font, which will be medium, text which will be gray 900, and a dark of text which will be white. And then inside of this h3, I want to get a project.title. That looks good. And now I also want to render an overview. For that, go under the h3 tag and under the a tag and create a new p tag. Let me style that. So let's give it a class name of margin top 2. Let's give it a text of small. Let's say a leading of relaxed, and let's do a text which will be gray 500 and a dark of, let's say, text gray 400. If I now save that, I will also have to add a value. So for the p tag, let's say project.overview. If I now save that and go back, you see right here we have a title with an overview. One thing I could also add for consistency reasons is add a line clamp. So however long I make my overview, even if it's 10 lines long, I only show 3 lines. And to do that, right here inside of the p tag, you'll only have to add a line clamp of, let's say, 3. And if I now save that and go back, you won't see anything. So for demo purposes, let's do a line clamp of 2. And if I now go back, you see each overview is only 2 lines long. But let's leave it at 3 and let's continue. So that looks great in my opinion. And now the last thing we'll need is an a tag on the bottom, so the user can click on the project, on the YouTube link, on the website, or whatever you have configured. So under the p tag, let's create an a tag. Let's give it an href of project.link. Let's give it a target of, again, _blank. And then also let's give it a class name of, let's say, group. Let's give it a margin top of 4, inline, which will be flex, items, which will be center, gap, which will be 1, text, which will be small, font, which will be medium, and text, which will be teal 500. And then inside of the a tag, let's just say learn more exclamation mark. If I now save that and go back, and this loads for a bit, you see right here we have the button with learn more, where the user can click on it. And if I click on one, so right here, you see we open a new tab with the video, which is loading right here. So that works great in my opinion. Maybe also let's add a small icon. So under this learn more, let's use a span element. Let's give it a class name of block. Let's do a transition all. And let's do a group hover. And then for the group hover, let's add an ms of 0.5. And now inside of the span, let's use this and icon r, a, r, and the semicolon. If I now save that and go back, you see right here we have this little arrow. And if I hover over it, it has the small little transition. So that looks great in my opinion, and we are done with that. If I now open dark mode, this also looks great. If I make it smaller, so right here on mobile devices, this also looks great in my opinion. Maybe you could add a bigger gap, so let's do that right now. So what we could do is change this gap 4 to, for example, a gap of x, which will be 8. Or not x, sorry, but y. If I now save that and go back, you see that the gap is now bigger. And if I make the device also bigger, we don't have this gap on the horizontal. So let me see right here, we have an MD of gap 6. I think that's because on small, we should have a gap of, again, 6. And if I now save that again, you see everything looks good. So yeah, if I make it bigger, that looks great. So yeah, let me again make it smaller. And I think, yes, that looks great in my opinion. Now, before I deploy anything, there's again one thing that I didn't add, and that's the same with Guestbook. So if you can remember with Guestbook, so let me open my Guestbook page real quick. You saw that we added a revalidate constant, and we have to do the same for our projects page because it's the same. We fetch something and the first request will be fresh, but once we deploy it and create new projects, our URL or our page in that sense won't show the new projects. So right here over our export default function, I will again have to add this export const revalidate, where we tell Vercel to please revalidate our fetch request after 60 seconds. You could of course change the seconds to whatever you want. You could say, I don't know, 10 minutes, a day, 5 seconds, whatever you want, however dynamic you want it to be. I will leave it at 60 seconds since I think that's good enough. But of course change it how you want, at your liking. And now, since everything is out of the way, I think we can deploy to Vercel. So to do that, you will have to go to github.com and create a new repository. And then right here, we'll have to give it a name. So let me just say portfolio YouTube, just like that. And then I will leave it at public. And now we can click on create repository. So right here now we get instructions how to create a new repository using the command line. So let's do that right now. Let's go back. Let me open my terminal. Let me stop my dev server and let's clear everything. Now the first thing I will have to do right here is to run git init. This will initialize a new repository. For me it has now initialized a new existing git repository, but for you it should be a new one. Then let's run in git add everything with a dot. This will now add everything. Then let's go back. The next step is to git commit. So let me copy that and let's change the message from first commit to, let's say, finished website. That looks good. Then the next step will be to create a new branch. So let's do in git branch main. And then the next step is to add our remote origin. So let me copy that and paste that inside of here. And the last step is to push our code. So let's copy that and paste that. This will now push our code to GitHub. So if I now go back to GitHub and reload the page, what will you see? You will see our beautiful code. So yeah, I think that's great. So now you see our code has been added. But I see one thing right now. You see in our GitHub repo right here, we have our sanity folder. And if I now go back to Vercel and click on deploy, it will try to deploy the sanity folder, which is not what I want to do. And to fix that, what you will have to go is back. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Let's create a new file, and the file will be called .vercel ignore. And inside of here, all I want to do is add sanity. And with that, I tell Vercel once we deploy that it should not deploy the sanity folder. And now what we'll have to do is again push everything. So let's do in git add everything. Let's do in git commit -m and let's say edit Vercel ignore, and let's click enter and let's do in git push. This will now push everything again. So now if I go back to GitHub and reload everything, you will right here see .vercel ignore. So now let's go back to Vercel right here, and now you see we have right here our name portfolio YouTube. So let me click on import, and now you see we have already a framework preset, but I have to add environment variables right here. So let's go back and let me open our .env file and let me copy this database URL. Let me now paste it inside of here and let's click on deploy. Now this will take a bit, so once it's done, I will come back. So, isn't it great? We got an error. Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to see. I didn't want a complete, fully working application. No, I wanted an error. That's the best thing, yeah. But let's check out what the error is. It tells us Prisma has detected that this project was built on Vercel, correct? Which caches dependencies. This leads to an outdated Prisma client because Prisma's auto-generation isn't triggered. Well, yes, that's correct. So let's click on this learn more right here. Let me copy that, let's paste that inside of Chrome, and let's see what Sanity will tell us, or Prisma, I'm sorry. And right here it gives us on solution a custom post install script. This is the preferred method as it's a universal solution. Okay, within the script section of your project's package.json file, if there's not already a script named post install, add one and add Prisma generate. So, okay, let's do that. Let me copy this post installed script. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code. Let me open package.json. And now under this lint right here, let me just add it. And now let's push that again. And before I push anything, let's run npm run lint to see if we get any errors or anything that we can make better. And now it tells us no ESLint warnings or errors. So that's great. So let's do git add everything within dot. Let's do git commit -m and let's say now fully working, something like that. And let's do git push actually. And this will now push our code to GitHub and Vercel will automatically rebuild our application. So let's check it out. So right here you see now it's building, and if I click on it, you can see the building process with the seconds. So I will now wait for a bit once that's done, and once it's finished with hopefully a successful deployment, I will come back. So it seems like if we got a successful deployment, so let me click on it on our URL now. This loads for a bit, that's okay. And let me zoom in a bit so you see something. And yeah, we have everything. We have the text, we have my image. Let me click on write mode and let's reload the page to see if everything works. And yes, it works, so that's great. And now let's click on Guestbook, and right here we have all of the messages. Let's create a new message. Hey, from the deployment. And let's click on send. This will now revalidate in the background and it tells us, hey, from the deployment, and the message has been cleared. So that looks great. And now let me click on projects, and as you see, this also works and the images load right here. So now that's done. It works everything like it should. I can click on white and dark mode. I can check out the mobile version and it also works as you see right here. So yeah, I think we are done. Since our application is now fully deployed, I think we can now also deploy Sanity, and for that you will have to open your terminal and cd into your Sanity folder. In your Sanity folder, all you have to do now is run npm run deploy, and this will now deploy your application to the web. But it will ask us for a name, for a studio host name. So let's name it Next.js portfolio. Let me spell that correctly. And let's say YouTube. Now I will click enter and this will now deploy everything. And once it's done, I will come back. So as you see, Sanity has been officially successfully deployed to the web. And I can now open this link right here, and as you see, this is now the deployed version of our Sanity Studio. I can now click on my project, create new projects, click publish, and I will then see it on my screen or on my project website. But yeah, that's all. We have now deployed our application successfully, we have deployed Sanity successfully, and we are done. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope I will see you on the next video. So, bye.